Cool. I'm gonna make a start. This is a good volume. Sweet. Yeah, we're talking about the art of Into the Dead of Darkest Days, specifically the environment art. Thanks for being here, everyone. And just first of all, a disclaimer. I'll be referring to Into the Dead of Darkest Days as Our Darkest Days, just for the simplicity of it. And graphic warning, this is a horror-themed game with zombies, so there's going to be a little bit of blood and guts, and maybe some brains. Cool, so a little bit about myself first. I'm Chellew, Xiaoyan Wu. I started off my career at Not Doppler, which is also a mobile game company based in Sydney. And after that, I kind of did different things. So I did architectural visualization, as well as some media work, and also outsourcing as well. And prior to Pickpock, I was at Weather FX for 3 years as a modeler, and now I've been at Pickpock for 2 years. And I am a 3D artist with a specialization in environment art. These two are my most recent personal project. That said, though, one is 2 years old, and the other one is 6 years old, and I guess I'll finish my next one sometime in the 2040s. Cool. I wanted to play this. This is a gameplay teaser for Our Darkest Days, but it's a YouTube link, and I don't think it's going to play very well here. How many of you here have tried the game? Okay. How many of you here kind of knows how the game works, like have seen it and such? Okay, a lot of us, okay. I'm just gonna sum it up here. So you are in Texas 1980s, and this is the start of zombie apocalypse. We're talking about like 2 weeks or 3 weeks into it's very fresh, and you play as desperate survivors through scavenging, crafting, and fighting. You're trying to make it out of Walton City alive. So that's the gist of the game. Cool. And environment art. How many of you here are artists? Can I have a show of hands? My people. How many of you specifically have done environment art? Yeah, I see my colleagues there, yes. And on a side-scroller game? Okay, there's a couple that's not my colleague. That's good to see. So just a clarification. So we usually split our environments into interior, exterior, and backgrounds for Our Darkest Days. Interiors, as you can see here, straightforward. Exterior, that's kind of, that include the facade of the building, as well as things that's quite close to the player character in the game. And we also have backgrounds, which usually we use that to describe things that are quite far away from the player playing. Yeah, so like in this case, the highway, the billboard, and lots of cars in the background, so that's backgrounds for us. And in this talk specifically, I'm gonna be mostly talking about interior, but there will be some exterior stuff as well. Cool. This is the outline of the talk. In this talk, I will brief you in with what makes a good and effective environment for us. Then I will expand into the role of environmental storytelling and share a couple of practical methods that can be generally applied to any type of environment art. And lastly, I will wrap up with some challenges and opportunities that we faced when we build environment for Our Darkest Days. Cool. So hyper-realistic details, high-res textures, or advanced tech specs, they are all great things to have. But a great environment for us isn't just about being visually impressive. What really matters is that it is fun, it tells a story, and it helps immerse the player. And to break it down into literal points, we have the fun, the readability, the authenticity, and provide narratives, which is the storytelling side of it. So fun is really mostly about level design, and we also have like zombie layout and loot layout as well. I just like to briefly touch base on this one. So generally speaking, for creating environment for Our Darkest Days, we first come up with location ideas, and then we have a brainstorm session together. Then the level designers kind of take these ideas that we come up with into creating a level design layout, and I'll show you how that looks in a little bit. And us environment artists then come in to tweak, create, and dress the space with appropriate props and lightings. So this is usually how it looks like when we first get the environment. Sorry, some of the texts are like a little bit misaligned. I think that's a Google Slides / PowerPoint issue, converting issue. But yeah, so as you can see there, couple things have changed from the above to below. First of all, obviously, it's not fully dressed. But if you pay a little bit more attention to it, you will see that the bottom one have a little bit more space, or like this wall here is being taken down. Yeah. And so we tweak the space depending on what makes sense. And we also change the depth of the space as well. It's a little bit hard to see here. And we also add cool visual elements that help sell the vibe and the setting of the space. For example, these like large windows at the back, as well as these exterior decors, the architecture. Cool. And let's talk about readability. So due to the nature of the game being a 2.5D side-scroller with limited camera movement, as well as having this foreground, player plane, and background setup, readability becomes especially important to us when creating environments. Hence why we always playtest throughout the process of dressing an environment. Give you two examples here. The first one being interactables like color points are not blocked by foreground elements. So as you can see here, Miguel is taking cover next to this cleaning trolley. And there are some fallen lockers in the foreground as well as like zombies on the foreground. So we just try to make sure that these are not overlapping, so the player can clearly see where they're taking cover, for example. And another example here, so staircases in our games, they are usually just off the player plane by a little bit in the background. And because of that, sometimes they are not super like visually clear where they are, especially like the enter point and the exit point of a staircase. And so what we do to counter that usually is we make sure that this space, the enter and exit point of staircases, are well lit. And authenticity. Connect player to the world is important, and authenticity is crucial in achieving that for us. I have concluded 4 subpoints for what authenticity is and how do we bring that into our darkest days. Historical and cultural accuracy. Because we are building a realistic world and want to convey that sense of realism to our players, it's important that we summarize and stay close to some of these key references from the real world in the past. So for example, rich earthy colors, abundant use of textures, architecture, signages, street layouts, vehicles, everything that should really reflect the time of the space that we are referencing to, not just looking like a generic American city. Brands, typography, posters, and consumer goods to also match the era. And thankfully, we have a very talented VizDev graphic team that help creating these. And I'll show you a couple more examples from the game. So first, we have 2 kitchens from different households. The architecture, the choice of surfacings, furnitures, props, both of them are true to the era, despite them being completely different from each other. An Italian American restaurant, as well as a vintage American diner. And office featuring lots of wood finishings, downlights, as well as period appropriate props. And here are just 2 little examples to show you how a different color tone and moody lighting would look in our game. World building. Authenticity to us also means that we create and communicate a believable world, one that functions like a real society, with both its upper and lower class represented. And to make sure we achieve that, we document these important information of district we create, such as the backstory, how affected it is by the outbreak, and what are the landmarks, etc., etc. And we create these information for every single district that we have in-game. And to further demonstrate, let's look at some bookends environments for each stage in our darkest days. So let's think a little bit together here. This is downtown Walton. What are some of the common visual language across that you can see? All right? So we see lots of skyscrapers, and pretty modern architectural, as well as nice open road, and it's relatively clean despite the recent outbreak that happened in our universe. We have Kingside, which is an upper-class residential area, and again, it's clean and got wide roads, very manicured vegetations, as well as lots of these sweet storage houses kind of scattered across this whole district. And we have Ashby. This is a lower class residential district. It's also one of my favorite districts from the game. We have these amazing looking power pylons that run across the whole district because it's bordering an industrial area, and it's also very imperfect district, I guess. It's very run down. Cool. Authenticity isn't only visual. A believable world makes survival tension credible, and this is when logic and function comes in handy. So two things that really matter the most for us: the type of store and survival modifications. And in terms of the type of stores, we have a record store represented in the game, which was popular back in the days before Spotify and YouTube Music. We also have these old school arcades for when people do not have easy access to game at home. And these are some of the survival modifications from our darkest days. So these boarded up windows, makeshift barricades, someone literally putting a ladder straight from their bedroom to the top of their garage, probably trying to elevate themselves from the threat on the ground floor. These are things that are there for logical reasons, not only as decoratives. And emotional truths. We want the player to feel the weight of the world, and by nature, the game should feel unsettling. And we try to achieve this by showing traces of chaos and life interrupted. We have expensive furniture repurposed being barricades, someone's secret hideout, and someone trying to escape, run away from the threat behind them, the horror behind them, as well as things left unfinished. We want our players to feel the grief of deserted homes, as well as the unease of broken communities. And provide narratives. So this is storytelling. What is storytelling? And I guess I like to think of it as when you look at a piece of art, it evokes the question of, so what happened here? What happened in this space? Some people think otherwise. And we certainly have done our shares in the game. And no further comments on that. So let's talk about the hierarchy of environmental storytelling. So we can break it down into three things, or three steps. And for our darkest days, I like to call them the world building, the location setting, and the environmental vignette. The world building. So our writers establish the role, culture, and history of the world. And as artists, then implement this general theme of the world into the environment. For example, having lots of blood, bodies, barricaded doors, broken storefronts, anything that helps communicate the state of the world that we are in. And location settings. So to give you an idea of what location setting is for us, I included these two pieces of stage descriptions here as an example. When we come up with level ideas, we aim to design specific space that reflect the function, mood, and identity, grounding the player in where they are. And environmental vignettes / scenarios. So this essentially, I like to think of it as in creating environment setup that communicates something beyond the provided visual elements. So like I mentioned before, it should make you think what happened here, or give you hints on what's happened here. And as simple as toppled chair or half-eaten meal to a full-on setup that involves multiple elements, environment vignettes can enhance the mood, develop a character, and describe a setting. And here are some great examples from our darkest days. Cool. Now we know what makes a good environment for our darkest days. What is environmental storytelling? I'd like to expand a bit more on why is storytelling important for us. So let's talk about the role of environmental storytelling for our darkest days. These are world buildings, communications, player engagement, and immersion. And to conclude the importance of any of these roles, we first need to understand what we aim to achieve. And we like to achieve these things. And so all of these should really play in harmony and march towards the same goal, which is to create an immersive world and engage the player. So world building. There's a lot to world building, but one aspect that I'd like to highlight here is specific game world knowledge. For example, from the overflowing bodies and stretchers outside of the hospital to an American football team that we created called the Walton Wasps, and this flashy state-of-the-art vintage arcade and its mascot. It's also important to know that these aren't location specific. You can find the mascot plushie in our world where it makes sense, such as many of the residential homes, especially the ones with children, not to discriminate anyone. So communication. So environmental storytelling is great for give clue on gameplay and lead player decisions. For example, on the top right here, we have this taped up door suggesting to the player that they don't have access to what lies beyond just yet. We also have these barricaded up staircases. And it's also good at supporting game mechanics and word logic. And one of our jobs as environment artists is to find interesting ways to justify design decisions. And if we look at bottom left here, our level designers wanted to give the player the option to traverse up to the rooftop from within this room. And to rationalize that, we came up with the scenarios like broken ceilings with a ladder going through it. And to furthermore embed the scenarios into the environment, we added debris on the ground to indicate damage, as well as associated props like tools and cables. Another example for supporting gameplay, staircases. And they're such boring space, and they often look identical, and we really don't like that. And we have this big office level that has many, many staircases. So we put up these color-coded signages to try to help the player from identifying where they are and minimize frustration and confusions. To truly engage our players, we enhance the game experience with emotions. Cutscenes and in-game events and conversations, they are powerful tools for evoking emotion, but props and environment alone can also reinforce the emotional beats of a section. And immersion. So for us, the environment shouldn't just look good, as I mentioned. They should feel lived in, unless they literally have not been lived in. And from glorious vignettes to personal belongings like family photos to grounds the player subconsciously pick up on, every detail tells us who lived here and what happened. Cool. Now that we have covered the fundamental of what matters to us, and the couple things we pay attention to when making environments that serves the game, I want to show you a couple practical tips on how to create story-rich environments. So I have summed it up into 5 things: composition, function and history, props design, materiality, object placement, and lighting. It was a bit tricky to put these into words because a lot of them tend to just come naturally once you've done enough environment art. But I was putting this section together. One common thread stood out across all of them, which is to have a clear intention when making decisions. So this is from one of the new stages we built for our most recent early access update, Spell Zone. I know you might be thinking that some of this environment looks cool because of the interesting concepts, like, it's in the industrial area, and it's got cool atmosphere, lights, as well as the smokes. It's already set up for success. Well, that's a big part of what makes an environment successful. You can absolutely make even the most basic environment interesting with environmental storytelling. And I'm going to prove my point by using a corridor within this environment I just showed you as an example. And let's talk about composition first. So this is essentially about where do you want the player focus to land. And for a corridor, it's pretty straightforward. It's tunnel or central focused. And let's talk about the function and history. I've listed down a couple questions to help you make a start. Why would the player pass through here? What is the space purpose? Who lived here? Who's still living here? What happened here? And what should the player experience in coming here? What message are you trying to convey? And using this corridor with, and I'd like to mention that this is also the phase where you should be gathering most of your reference materials and make sure they're accurate to what you're trying to build. And using this corridor within this admin complex building, here were some reference images we gathered for it. And this is how that transfer into the actual environment. So it's a space where function is prioritized over comfort. So props design and materiality. This is pretty self-explanatory. Objects tell stories through their style, type, wear and tear, and material choices. And to help us make these decisions, it'd be helpful knowing where the space is located within the building. And to give you a bit of a context here. So this is that corridor. And to the left of it is a bathroom/shower. To the right of it is the outside of building connecting to staircases. And so while I was dressing this space, it made sense for me that for this space to be where workers could take a breather. So I added a couple of ceilings, coat hangers, vending machines to provide drinks. I want to suggest that this is somewhere to pause before heading to the shower or wrap up for the day. But then, to make it more interesting, how about something that's even more specific? Like, what about a vignette suggesting that someone was in the middle of loading up these vending machines as the outbreak happened? Actually. And so that's why I added this carrier as well as like an open box with some loose soda cans on the ground. And object placement. So now we have our objects, but how do we place them is very important. It's a space, this one specifically, it's a space that people come and go, not a space to be treated with. Clear? So more grunges on the floor, misalign the seatings, really randomize that rotation a little bit, and shoes and clothing scattered across the floor. And lighting. This is the core of any good environment, like 100%. And when we talk about lighting, usually we try to look at what are the inbuilt lights and what are the mobile lights within this environment. So inbuilt light, for example, there are these tube lights on the rooftop, like they already are embedded into the environment, as well as this emergency light. And mobile lights, they can they can range from, light from the television screen, or like a torch, or like opened fridge doors with the glowing light coming from within it. And so for this one specifically, I like to keep the light at the back, no spoilers, highlighting the scenario that I wanted to emphasize. And so I want to bring attention into that. And I also decided to turn the front light off just to create a little bit more like hierarchy and to emphasize unsettling feeling and the mysterious. And I've also decided to turn on this emergency light, suggesting that something have gone wrong here, and also just to add a little bit more colors in here, make it look a little bit interesting. And these are some of our corridors in game. We really do love our corridors, and we love to have fun with them. Cool. Hope that was entertaining and informative. Let's wrap this up with a couple of specific challenges and opportunities that we found for building beautiful and story-rich environments for our darkest days. Compositionable. This is my absolute favorite things about being an environment artist for our darkest days. Because we have very controlled camera angles, we get to choose where the focus point length, as well as utilize shape language better. And so here, let's look at what we want to lead players' eyes to things, like which part of the environment that we like them to focus on. So the first thing is this ladder. They can traverse up here, and there's this threat, the zombie, right in front of them. And to further demonstrate this, we have this highway forming a line that just kind of points towards the ladder, leading your eyes into that. And we also have this tilted, slightly sloped roof that also creates a line that points towards where the zombie is, roughly. To give you another example here, a pretty chaotic living room, but if you break down some of the elements in here, so we have this toppled plant and this fallen lamp here forming a straight line, directing your eye to this open fridge with glowing lights at the background. And this fridge also happened to land roughly on the third of the canvas. And we also have another line here to just bring in a sense of balance here. And depth. So in our games, we can only show one cross section. So instead, we utilize depth of space and lots of different interior layouts. So deep spaces to communicate the true scale of the environment, as well as player-facing rooms to inspire imaginations of what lies beyond. Okay, this is an interesting one. Do players really want reality? Our darkest days is 2.5D, which the real world isn't, which means we bend reality to fit our game. And question, how many of you have been to a fertilizer plant? Right, even if you have not been inside one, you probably have this mental image of what an industrial plant looks like, whether or not that image is accurate. And our job as environment artists is to find the balance between what's in players' head, what is real, and how do we convey that in the format of our game. And one of the best ways to do that is to be deliberate of what we show. For example, prioritizing showing interesting space that has human touch. And to demonstrate that, we have this upper-class residential home here. And for this one specifically, we opt for showing living room and this open-plan kitchen instead of like bedroom or bathrooms or anything like that, because it is what really sets this home apart from some of these other residential homes we have in the game. And here's an example of one of the most frequent things we do to bend reality to fit our game. In reality, not every doorway is aligned. And here I have a screenshot from this virtual tour of a building that actually exists. And I've highlighted where the center of the doorways are with these yellow lines. And as you can see, they don't align. And even if you look at the other side, like the other way, there's another one here, another two here, and they don't align, right? But in our games, it does align, because it has to align on the player plane. That needs to be this way, and that's how our game is constructed. So these are walls in the game, and this is the center of the doorway, which is also our player plane. Scale matters. Player can't freely go around in our game and look at things up close, which drives set dressing decisions. So, for example, here, instead of having a couple of pieces of artwork scattered across on the ground and some knickknacks or expensive-looking decorations, we decided to put a whole caravan here, and someone perhaps was just loading the goodies they stolen from another house into the caravan. Because this detail is large and it's hard to miss. And we have another example here. So instead of having a zombie head rolling around the ground and having a pool of blood around it, which is relatively easy to miss from our game's camera angle, we decided that maybe half a zombie is more or less enough, for you to see. And this is also one thing that I learned very early on since I joined the project, which is primary and secondary details are generally more important than tertiary details for our game. Using the hardware store here as an example, we have this big hammer signage outside of the hardware store, indicating that this space has something to do with tools. And we also have lots of these little things on the counter within the shop that I spend hours crafting. And it's hard to see unless you're staring into them and you have a 4K monitor, And so I guess the lessons here really is make sure important details are readable. Think big, then think small. Visual cohesion. So I briefly mentioned about this. So consistent era across the game, like I mentioned at the very start. So historical and cultural accuracy. And also consistent across a district. So to remind you, our beloved Ashby with these huge power pylons running across. And what about consistency across a location, though? Why does that matter? Well, because it also helps with immersion and reinforces the story you want to tell. It allows the player to quickly grasp essential information about an environment through visual cues. Things like, when was this built, why was it built, and how was this space being used or treated by the people who used to live here? I have a couple screenshots that captures the same stage here. This is Old Ballad, and I hope you can see the consistent visual language that runs throughout. And this is another residential home from the middle class district. Non-linear structures. Unlike many other games, there isn't one single correct path for our Darkest Days. Players are given the freedom to craft their own path and story. And this also works in our favor by giving us artistic freedom to create cool and memorable individual environments rather than environments that just exist solely to funnel the players forward. So players enter a stage by selecting it on the map, and once the stage is being loaded, the very first thing they see is the exterior environment outside of the building that they're about to enter. So these bookend environments, and these are just so great at trying to tell you a little bit more, giving you a glimpse into the wider world beyond. We poured a lot of effort into handcrafting this world, hoping it will serve the experience we want to create for our player, which is an immersive survival experience that's tense, credible, challenging, but ultimately fun. I'm a fan of what the team have built, and I'm grateful that I could be here to present some of these to you. With that, this is the end of my presentation, and thank you for being here, and special thanks to my team for providing help, feedback, and knowledge, which made this presentation complete. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm 100% not biased at all, but this is my all-time favorite game. And it's on sale now on Steam, 20% off, so please consider, go check it out, and I hope you enjoy it. Cool. And we have some time for questions, but please be gentle with me. All right, yeah.
How do you consider silhouettes and placements in the room to make it feel like full or realistic in the environment without cluttering or like hindering players' movement?
Can you repeat the last part?
The rooms and the environments that feel full or realistic without cluttering like players' movement.
Yep. So the question is, how do we make the room feel natural and feel full without being overly cluttered and restrain the player's movement? Yeah. So we have this, like I mentioned, we have this player plane foreground and background setup. And so when we place these objects within the game, really be mindful of what the player path is, where exactly are the player plane. And already having that like at the back of our heads when dressing the environment, as well as playtesting a lot. When you're actually running through the environment, if you are colliding into anything, then you will see. We need to avoid having any large objects that's very close to the player plane, but something we can do, which is, small gouges or piece of papers on the ground. They don't interfere with player passing. So we use these to kind of fill in the blanks between these separate layers that we have in the environment. Yeah, so I guess that's sort of how I hope that answers that. Awesome. Yes?
Great talk, thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned that the level designers would hand off their environments to you, and then sometimes you would make tweaks to that. And you also mentioned about finding sort of purpose of some of the environmental design they've made. How do you handle when you can't find purpose, or those tweaks you've made might change the gameplay? What does that look like?
Okay, so the question is, when we are provided with some of the level designs, how do we work with purposing the place when we find it hard to purpose them? We always find a way. Yeah, it's a really good question, and there are definitely cases that's tricky to work with. And we work very closely with our level designers. So if we find something that's just incredibly hard to justify, then we come back and forth with them. We try to meet in the middle to create something that everyone is happy with. Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I had a question about with the sort of the grey boxing phase. So you showed stuff. Do you guys get involved with that whole sort of purposing space that helps inform the grey boxing the level? Is that all kind of getting feedback that requires the grey boxing?
Okay, so the question is, when we are provided with the gray boxing, so the level design, are we? What in, sorry, what? Yeah. Yeah, so we have a brainstorm session together usually when we decide to create a stage. And so everyone, through talking, through the brainstorm session, we kind of already try to align our ideas of what the stage is going to be. And the designers, our designers are oftentimes very responsible and helpful people. And so when they design, when they design the space, sometimes they drop helpful notes as in what they think the space should be used for. And when we come in, we sometimes either agree or disagree with that. And then again, this just communication that needs to happen there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
You said that human environments are centered around like enriching the character's role, but do your characters ever influence the type of environments that you make to show off their personality or development?
Good question. So the question is, does any of our characters influence the environment that we build? We have environments that are built within knowing that this environment used to be someone's residential home. I'm trying to think of a more specific example.
Krista, character. Sorry. We've had on the character prequels and often there's environments like Sandy LA, a grandmother who really likes gardening. You find her front door of a school, she's like giving to the garden to high functions because she wants to look after what comes like.
Yeah.
So yeah, we think like there's environments for those group characters for it as well.
Yeah. So just to rephrase that, Nikki's mentioned Christine, which is one of our recruitable characters, and you find her in, I'm not going to spoil which environment that is. You'll find her at a specific location and we created a garden bed, so like vegetable little garden beds for her, and so to justify, that she is a lady with the trait of, having these, like I think you get like 2 more vegetables each phase or something like that. Oh, she harvests more vegetables. And there's another one I think of, which is where you find Michelle, which is another recruitable character in our game, and you find her literally in her residential home. So that's, giving you a bit of a clue of what is the background that she comes from. And so we try to dress that environment to fit her settings. Yeah. Cool?
We have time for one more.
We might have, yes.
Okay, sorry. So the game itself, the art direction clearly seems inspired by sort of late 70s, early 80s kind of slasher flicks, and it's very well put together. Now, given the inspiration, a lot of the times the material they're referencing is way more claustrophobic, way more the camera is sort of different. So the question is, given the necessity of gameplay, you need to pull back and to show everything. What is the line that we're trying to get? It's like, we need to emulate the reference material, but we can't do it quite. Are you relying and saying like, well, hopefully we did all these things, we washed it out, we did this thing with the line, we deployed this amount of visual phrase. Do you have an internal sense of like, I think we pulled it off, or are you writing the line? How is that from your point of view, like doing the scene?
It's a really good question. We're running out of time, so maybe we can continue that conversation just off stage. No, that's all good. Yeah, that's some really good questions. Thanks everyone again for being here. So.